Today, I'm going to show you how to block ads when you're browsing on your browser or on your phone or whatever when you're using your internal network using a tool called AdGuard. So let's get started. So let's first talk about what AdGuard Home is. It's a network-wide software for blocking ads and tracking. And in fact, it even has the ability to block some malware, because it has a list that I'll show you later on that kind of go into blocking those things. You don't need any client-side software. It's basically done on DNS. It captures all your DNS traffic, and it will block domains that it considers to be ads. And also, if you select the appropriate lists, it will be it'll block domains that have malware in them. And there is an add-on for Home Assistant, and that's what we're going to use today. It's the Home Assistant community add-on called AdGuard Home. And again, it's a network-wide ad tracker blocking DNS server with parental control, which means it has adult content blocking. It lets you control your entire network and all your devices, and it doesn't require any client-side programs. It has a really neat interface, which we'll go into in a minute, and gives you all kinds of information and settings to go through. So let's go right into it. Let me show you, first of all, how we install AdGuard Home. You're going to go into your Home Assistant. And by the way, you don't have to use Home Assistant. You can install this on other things, but I'm going to show you the Home Assistant way today because my whole ecosystem is running on Home Assistant and all the add-ons that it provides. So we'll go into configuration and we will look for add-ons. And you're going to go to the add-on store and you're going to search for AdGuard. Now this is under the Home Assistant Community Add-ons section of the add-on store. So if you don't have that, you need to look at repositories over here and make sure that you have the Home Assistant Community Add-ons repository add-on. And the way you do that is you just take the URL, you'll this one here, if you don't have it, put it in here and click on add, and it will add in that repository. A lot of these add-ons are in the Home Assistant Community Add-ons section. So you then would click it and you would go ahead and install it. I've already installed it. It's already up and running. So you come into configuration, and the only thing you need to check is to make sure that your DNS server port is open. Typically 53 is the default. All your devices in your network are going to use this. And then of course you would start it up. And once it's up and running, we can go ahead and go into the web UI. And the web UI, is, like I said, is really nice. It has a lot of neat stuff on it. And we'll just start with the dashboard here. Now, right off the bat, you can see that you can turn off protection, which means you can disable the blocking part of it if you need to turn that off for some reason. So general statistics for the last 7 days. So I've had 561,483 queries. 60,000 of them have been blocked, or 61,000. That's almost an 11% block rate for just queries. No blocked malware, phishing, and no blocked adult websites. I may not even have this turned on. And then you can go into the detail here. Your average processing time for a query is 32 milliseconds. And then you have your top clients that are using the AdGuard add-on. And then you have your top query domains and your top blocked domains. This gives you a little insight into what your devices are doing as well. Even if you don't use it for anything else, you can at least see what stuff is talking. So that's the dashboard, pretty simple there. Let's go into settings. So under settings, you have general, DNS, encryption, client, and DHCP. We'll start with general settings. So you really want to block domains using filters and hosts. That's the whole point of using AdGuard. So this is default checked, I believe. You can update your filters on a specific interval, every hour, every 12, up to 7 days, or you can disable it entirely. I'll leave it at 24 hours. You can use the AdGuard Browsing Security Web Service. It will check if the domain is blocked by the Browsing Security Web Service, which is a privacy-friendly lookup. Let me blow this up for you. A privacy-friendly lookup API, and it performs the check. Only a short prefix of the domain in a SHA-256 format is sent to the server. It will match that prefix part, and if it matches a prefix, it'll come back as a security thing. You can use the Parental Control Web Service to block adult materials, and you can enforce safe search. Now, if you enforce safe search, you're going to get a lot of stuff blocked. I do a lot of YouTubing, obviously. And when I search for things on within the YouTube search or Google or something else, safe search will actually block a lot of that stuff. I can't get to it. So this is actually a little overkill for what I need, so I don't turn that on, but you can experiment with it and see what it does for you. You can enable your logs. You can anonymize the client IP if you want to. In a home network, it probably doesn't matter to you. And then your query logs retention can be for whatever length of time you want. And I'll show you what the query logs are here in a minute. And then you can clear those query logs. Statistics are another section of retention, and that's what your dashboard is based on. So the last 7 days is what I showed you there. That's what my current retention is set to. And you can change it for even from 24 up to 90 days. Now, a lot of that's going to be depend on, number one, how much retention you need, and number two, how much space you have to store all your statistics. All right, so that's the general settings page. Let's look at the DNS settings. This is where you're going to set up some interesting things here. Now, number one, you can set up more than one DNS upstream. These are called upstream DNS servers. And these are servers that your AdGuard device or your AdGuard add-on will go to get an IP address that it needs to get to. So it goes to your DNS server, your AdGuard first, and then your AdGuard goes upstream and gets the data you need. So on this one, I have two DNS servers, and they give you some examples down here. You have unfiltered.adguard, which is DNS over TLS. You have DNS query, DNS over HTTPS, DNS over quick, which is experimental, and then some other ones. So I'm using a couple of them. Quad9 is a DNS provider, and I'm doing this over HTTPS, which means it's SSL based. I'm also doing a TLS version that is DNS over TLS, and that is encrypted as well. And what this does is a lot of times your ISP will snoop on your traffic at the border router, your border router, or maybe their ingress router, to find out what you're doing. And then they can send information wherever to tailor ads back to you. Well, if you're using something like this, where your queries to your upstream DNS providers are encrypted either via SSL or TLS encryption, they can't snoop on those DNS queries as easily. There's nothing to say that somehow they can't snoop on it somewhere. But for the most part, you're shutting them down, not letting them track where you're going on your internal ISP to your house or your location network. So I recommend you do some sort of encrypted or SSL-based upstream providers. And you can then also set load balancing, parallel requests, or fastest IP. I'm doing parallel requests because what that does is it speeds up the resolving to your upstreams by sending your request to all the upstream servers simultaneously, and then you get a response back from the fastest one. Your bootstrap DNS is going to be the DNS server that tells your site how to get to your upstream. You notice these are DNS 10, Quad 9. These are not IP addresses. These are domain names. So you've got to resolve the upstreams. The way you resolve the upstreams is you provide a bootstrap server with an IP address. And now all it does is goes out and gets the addresses for your upstream servers. So in this case, I'm using Cloudflare 1111 DNS address. You can do more than one here as well, and it will get the address for your upstreams. And then you can do private reverse DNS. My AdGuard is providing just DNS. It's not providing DHCP. So it doesn't know the address of the devices within my network. But what does know that is my Unifi router. And so what I've done here, this private reverse DNS server can look up my local network devices through the Unifi server or Unifi router, and then use that in AdGuard. So anytime it needs to find an address, it will look it up here. And it also defaults to this one. This is the actual internal network for the Home Assistant system that I'm running this on. So I want to make sure it can resolve stuff internal to Home Assistant as well. So I've got both of these in here as my private reverse DNS servers. And then of course you've got to tell it to turn it on. So if you want your internal network stuff to resolve, turn this on to something that has a location of your internal devices. And you can do enable reverse resolving of clients. So this will turn their IP address and their host names by sending porno queries to the resolvers, either private DNS or local or upstream for other stuff. And then you want to test your upstreams, and everything looks good. You will see that you get a thing here that says specified DNS servers are working correctly. So that is important to make sure you test that before you finish all of this. You can do DNS rate limiting. You can enable eDNS, DNSSEC, and you can disable the resolving of IPv6 addresses. And then you can choose your blocking mode. I don't worry about any of that. I leave all this as default for your DNS cache. And then you can set up a list of allowed IPs or CIDRs or client IDs that are allowed to use your AdGuard server and force everything else somewhere else. And then you can do disallowed domains. So you get all that set up and basically you're ready to go start serving. So client settings, this is where you will set up your clients. So if you want to map a client IP to a name, you would do that in here. You just click on add client, get a name. You can select the type of device or tag if you really want to. And then your identifier would be either a IP address, MAC address, or special client ID. And then you can set up blocking specific to that device. So if I only want to block services, specific services on a device, I'll turn off the global block and choose the things I want to block here on this list, and it will only block them for that device. So those are basically like client overrides. So you can do that there. And also what you have here is clients that are picked up by AdGuard and what their IP addresses are. Some of this here you'll see is picked up by that reverse pointer stuff. And you'll see that I have them all picked up by ARP, which is how it's getting it from my network. It knows these names from the network. All right, so that's the client settings. Now we can go into DHCP settings, which we're not using here. You can enable the DHCP server, and you can select an interface to put it on. And you can set up all of the settings that you would normally set up for DHCP4 or IPv4 and IPv6. And you can set up static leases and whatnot. I don't use this for DHCP, but AdGuard can certainly do it for you. If you want to run DHCP and AdGuard and DNS blocking and everything all on one device, this will do it for you. Again, I don't do that. I use my Unifi for that. All right, so let's go to filters. Filters are fun as well. We have DNS Blocklists, and these are the block lists that you are going to be getting queries against to determine whether or not it's going to block the domain or whatever. By default, AdGuard DNS filters in here, and if you click on any of these, you'll get the rules that are listed in here. Now, these don't have any in there for some reason, but they're included in the AdGuard setup by default. But if you click on this URL, you now have a listing of all of the domains and subdomains that are blocked by AdGuard. And there's 16,000, like this thing isn't even moving. I mean, there's tons and tons and tons and tons of these in here. And they're blocked using this AdGuard DNS filter, and it was last updated today sometime. All right, you can add block lists as well, and you can choose from the list or add a custom. Custom will require you to put a URL in and a name. But if you want to add a block list that's not on here from the list, let's say I want to add some sort of malicious URLs list, and you can add regional ones as well. I'm just going to add that security, or in both of these, let's say, and I'm going to save that. Now I have two other block lists on here, and these lists are lists of sites that are basically malware or security related. And so this will give you the information here. And if you click on it, here are the rules, or these are the IP addresses of known hacked addresses that you can't get to or shouldn't be able to get to for both of these lists. There's 5,827 here and 13,822 here. And all of these will come back and be blocked as well for security purposes. So I'm going to leave that running. I've never actually done the security part of it, but I think that's interesting. We'll see how well that works. All right, those are the DNS block lists. You have the DNS Allow lists. You can allow the domains from the allow list will be allowed even if they're any of the block lists. So if you have something that's blocked that you want to get to, you can go ahead and add it to the whitelist. Regardless of what the blacklist says, it will be allowed and you can get to that domain. All right, we have DNS rewrites. Now this is an important one if you're doing public-facing domains and you want them to map to an internal IP address here in your local network. I have a number of domains over here that are mapped to internal IP addresses. So my main Home Assistant domain, I can get to it from the outside through public DNS resolution. But if I'm internal to my network, I want to be able to get to the local IP address internally because I don't want to go outside of my router and try to come back in. And a lot of times that will fail anyway. So I just map it from the domain to the IP address internally through a DNS rewrite. All right, so let's go to block services. These are all services that you can block by default. If you check to use the global blocking list, this is what you're going to get. This is what it'll use. So you can block all of these different domains directly in here, and they keep adding to this list. If you want to, you can just block them all or unblock them. But it's a nice way to block services from your internal network. And then finally, custom filtering rules. You can create a bunch of custom filtering rules, and here's some examples on how to do it. In this case, these API Cloud Catalog 6pm.com was being blocked. My wife couldn't get to this catalog page or the Zappos page. And so I set up a rule to custom filter these rules and set them as important. Now I could also put them in the whitelist, which is probably where I should have stuck them before. But you can see here that you unblock access to the example domain and all its subdomains. And that's something I've done here through the examples and through this custom filtering rules. All right, so that's all of the primary settings for AdGuard. It's not hard to set up, but you can see it's very customizable. You can do all kinds of fun stuff with it. So if we look at the query log now, we can see what has been queried here. And with this, you can do either from a domain. So let's do 172.16.1.114. You can just choose a host and see what it's been querying. You can hover over this and see what DNS server it came from. It says it was served from cache. And that's another thing, by the way. When you go out and query a domain for the first time, AdGuard caches that. It stores it locally. So the next time it queries it, it pulls it from the local device rather than having to go out to the internet. That's another benefit of having an internal DNS server is all your requests for sites you frequent are going to come from the cache, and they're going to be faster to resolve. You can also go in here and choose from a different filter list. All filtered, processed, blocked by services, blocked because of threats, blocked by parental control, etc. So let's just say blocked. Let's see if there's anything on this that has been blocked on this particular device. I don't see anything here, so let me clear the filter and we'll see what all got blocked. Yeah, Roku. Lots and lots of Roku stuff has been blocked. Another CDN has been blocked from my phone. iPad has blocked something on the iPads. So you can just kind of go through and see what's being queried. Conversely, if you find something in here that's not being blocked, you can go ahead and block this for this client or disallow for this client. You can block it directly for the client if you want to do that. All right, so that's the query log. The query log is only good for as long as you're storing that. In my case, I believe it's 24 hours under the settings you saw. And finally, the setup guide. So if you want to use AdGuard Home, you need to configure your devices to use it. So AdGuard Home is listening to on the following addresses. It tells you that right here in the setup. So once you install it, if you want to know what to set your DNS server to in your DHCP or on your devices directly, if you're statically setting them up, these are the IP addresses. Now, again, this IP address is for internal Home Assistant. I just happen to recognize this. This is the public-facing interface, meaning the interface towards my network that you're getting from AdGuard or AdGuard is listening on. So you would point all your DNS queries from your network to this IP address right here. Let's go to my router. This is how this works on a Unifi router. And what this is this is my network, my internal network. And I've got a DHCP server turned on here with my DHCP range set to this address. My DHCP name server is set to manual. And I've got 2 of these AdGuard instances running. And as we talked about under settings, this is my IP address that I've got on this first one. So it's 172.161.121. And so my first IP address for my DHCP name server will be 172.161.121. My second Home Assistant instance is also running AdGuard. That's the one I use for development work and playing around with, but it does run AdGuard. And it's especially important if I reboot reboot this host right here, then this is not going to resolve anything while it's rebooting. If you've got people actively using your network at the time, they're going to get timeouts and all kinds of problems. So I have a backup in case I need to do that. You can run both of these at all the time, and what it'll do is pick whichever one is the fastest or the best one, your client will. So I have 2 AdGuards running. In the configuration, though, there may be a way to do this, and you can tell me in the comments down below, but I don't have it synced between the 2. There's not a failover with this one. I don't know if the home version will allow that. So my settings have to be mapped across manually between the main one and the backup one, so that all the settings are the same if I want them that way. It's not super important because I only turn this one on whenever there's an issue with the first one. But it needs to still have, the upstream's DNS servers and all the settings correct so it'll actually resolve stuff. All right, so those are internal. If you wanted a third DNS server, in my case, the Unifi leaves me the ability to do 4, I would put an external DNS server. So if all of your internal network resolvers fail, then you have an external network server to get to. All right, so that's how I set it up on my router. Now, anytime somebody gets onto my network and gets an address assigned to them, they're going to go ahead and get the AdGuard DNS servers because that's what my DHCP is going to tell them. They're going to get the ability to have ad protection and malware protection. And if I jump onto my VPN using Tailscale or WireGuard, it's going to use my internal DNS servers because that's how I have it set up as well. So even when I'm roaming around the world, if I get on my VPN that comes back to my local network, I get the benefit of using AdGuard, and I get the benefit of ad removal and malware protection as well. So that's a plus for doing something like this. Now, if you want to go and put stuff on your individual client machines, like your Windows, your Mac, your Android phones, or iOS or whatever, you can do that if you happen to be statically putting IP addresses on the clients. And it talks about how to do that. If you're doing static addresses for your clients, you most likely know how to do this, but it's nice to see that AdGuard has put in instructions on how to do specific things. Now, this final thing is the DNS privacy. If you're going to use DNS over HTTPS or DNS over TLS from your client to AdGuard, not from the upstreams, but from your client to AdGuard, you need to configure encryption. And there's this whole section on AdGuard encryption that you have to go through, all these steps you need to follow. You can certainly do this. That means any kind of DNS traversal in your internal network is going to be covered by the encryption, not only upstream, but also on your local network. So there is a really long video on a single application called AdGuard. Set it up, use it. It's super easy. I know there's Pi-hole as well, but I like AdGuard for the interface, for the ease of use, for the ease of DNS rewrites. So if you have any questions, drop those down in the comments. I hope you liked the video. I thank you for watching. If you did like it, hit a thumbs up on that button right there. And if you're not a channel member, I'd really appreciate it if you would subscribe. It helps me support what I do here. And thanks for watching. We'll see you on the next one.